Is the American empire declining? A provocative question indeed. It's a query that's been buzzing around lately, making its way into conversations from coffee shops to international forums. But why? Well, there are a multitude of reasons that have led to this question. Let's unpack a few, shall we? First up, we have the ever-shifting global power dynamics. The Global South, once considered the underdogs of the international community, are now rising in prominence and challenging the established order. Meanwhile, the United States, a traditional powerhouse, is grappling with a changing role on the international stage. Then, there's the economy. The US dollar, once a symbol of American strength, is facing some serious competition. Emerging markets and cryptocurrencies are giving it a run for its money, quite literally. Lastly, we can't ignore the internal discourse and divisions within the United States itself. The country is wrestling with its own identity, cultural norms, and the direction it wants to take in the future. Before we delve deeper, remember that empires rise and fall. It's a natural cycle in history. To understand the current scenario, we must look at recent events. In the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, a culture war has erupted in the West, causing a significant stir. This conflict is not merely a battle of arms, but a clash of ideologies, deeply rooted in differing perspectives on global politics. In the heart of America, there's a tension between pro-Israeli Republicans and pro-Palestinian Democrats in Congress, each side fervently advocating for their respective stances. This divide is not merely a domestic issue, but carries implications for America's international relations and its role on the world stage. President Joe Biden, in a move that aligns with European opinion, has called for a pause in Israel's military campaign. This decision, while seemingly diplomatic, reveals the conditions of U.S. support for Israel. It's a clear indication that America's backing is not unconditional. This could potentially signal a shift in the long-standing U.S.-Israel alliance, an alliance that has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy for decades. However, it's not just about Israel. The situations in Ukraine and Taiwan are also under the spotlight. These conflicts, like a tangled web, present a complex challenge for the Biden administration. If these situations evolve into no-exit wars, the implications could be far-reaching, testing America's material and moral resources for waging wars. These events have certainly stirred the pot. But what do they mean for the American empire? Are they signs of a declining power or simply challenges that need to be overcome? These are questions we must explore as we continue to delve into the current state of the American empire. Security lapses and escalating conflicts. A recipe for disaster? This is a question that's been circling the globe as we grapple with increasingly tense geopolitical landscapes. Israel, a key player in the Middle East, has been plagued with security concerns that could potentially catalyze a regional war. The situation is fraught with uncertainty as alliances shift and old grudges resurface. In the same breath, we can't ignore the simmering tensions in Ukraine. The term no-exit wars has been used to describe the conflicts in both Ukraine and Israel, painting a grim picture of prolonged unrest with no clear resolution in sight. These are not battles that can be won or lost in a day, but rather, they are intricate webs of political, social, and economic factors, each one influencing the other, creating a complex and volatile situation. Now let's turn our gaze towards the East, specifically China. As this Asian powerhouse continues to grow in strength and influence, the potential threat it poses to Taiwan cannot be overlooked. The balance of power in the Pacific is delicate, and any aggressive move from China could potentially upset this equilibrium, leading to unforeseen consequences. In the grand scheme of things, these regional conflicts and security concerns are not just isolated incidents. They are pieces of a larger puzzle, each one contributing to the overall picture of global stability or instability. It's a domino effect where the fall of one could potentially trigger the collapse of others. The stakes are high, and the world watches anxiously. The outcome of these conflicts could shape the course of international relations for years to come. As the world teeters on the brink of these potential crises, one thing is clear: the need for strong, decisive, and compassionate leadership has never been greater. Money makes the world go round, and it also determines the rise and fall of empires. And it's no different for the United States. An empire's economic strength is often a measure of its global standing. And for America, there are two key aspects to consider: the national debt and the strength of the US dollar. Let's start with the national debt. The United States is currently shouldering a massive debt burden. a situation that has been exacerbated by the financial demands of ongoing conflicts and domestic programs. This debt is not just numbers on a paper, but it has real-world implications. It can limit the country's ability to invest in key sectors like education and healthcare, which are crucial for long-term growth and competitiveness. More importantly, it can also constrain the nation's ability to respond to new crises, whether they be economic, security-related, or humanitarian in nature. Now, let's move on to the strength of the US dollar. The dollar has long been the world's dominant reserve currency, underpinning global trade and finance. This status gives the US considerable economic and political leverage. However, this dominance is being challenged. The Global South, a term referring to emerging economies, is increasingly flexing its economic muscle. Countries like China and India are growing rapidly, and their currencies are becoming more influential in global markets. If the dollar's dominance wanes, it could reduce America's ability to influence global economic policies. And it might also make it more expensive for the US to borrow money, potentially exacerbating the national debt problem. To sum it all up, the state of the US economy, as reflected in its national debt and the strength of the dollar, is a critical factor that can influence America's global standing. While the US remains an economic powerhouse, these concerns should not be overlooked. Economic strength is indeed a key factor in determining the fate of an empire. While international events make headlines, internal conflicts can be equally decisive. As we shift our gaze from the global stage to the home front, we find a nation grappling with its own cultural clashes. These internal culture wars, often overlooked, can have a profound impact on a nation's unity, strength, and ultimately, its global standing. In the United States, the cultural battlefield is diverse and complex, with ideological divides cutting across political, social, and economic landscapes. These divides are not merely intellectual exercises, they're real, tangible, and can have far-reaching implications. Take, for example, the tensions in Congress between pro-Israeli Republicans and pro-Palestinian Democrats. These aren't just political skirmishes, they're symptomatic of a deeper cultural divide that questions the very principles of foreign policy. The implications of these internal conflicts are not confined within the borders of America. They spill over, affecting the international image of the country and influencing its global alliances. Or consider the debates surrounding security lapses, regional conflicts, and the country's capacity to wage wars. These are not just discussions about military strategy or resource allocation, they're reflections of a broader cultural war, one that grapples with America's role in the world, its moral obligations, and its ability to uphold the mantle of global leadership. The internal culture wars in America are not just about who wins the next election. They're about defining what America stands for, what values it upholds, and how it sees its role in an increasingly interconnected world. These wars are not fought with bullets and bombs, but with words, ideas, and values. They're wars that question the very fabric of American society, challenging its norms, its beliefs, and its identity. And just like any war, these culture wars have casualties. They deepen divides, erode trust, and can weaken the unity and strength of a nation. So while we consider the rise of the Global South, the fluctuating strength of the US dollar, and the shifting global power dynamics, let's not forget the battles being fought on the home front. Because internal unity often reflects external strength, and the world is watching. So, is the American empire on the decline? This question has been at the heart of our discussion. We've delved into recent events, the implications they carry, the security concerns, and regional conflicts that are shaping the world stage. We've explored the economic considerations, the strength of the US dollar, and the emerging power of the Global South. The complexity of these issues is immense. From the aftermath of October 7th attacks to the internal culture wars, from the tensions between pro-Israeli Republicans and pro-Palestinian Democrats, to the potential for no-exit wars in Ukraine and Israel. All these factors contribute to a dynamic, ever-evolving geopolitical landscape. We've also scrutinized the burden of America's debt and the questions surrounding the country's material and moral resources for waging wars. We've looked at the criticisms of President Biden's ability to handle multiple conflicts and the concerns about America's loss of authority and confidence. The future, as always, is unpredictable. The American empire may rise, fall, or transform in ways we can't yet foresee. But if there's one takeaway from our discussion, it's this. The future of the American empire is uncertain, but one thing is clear: change is inevitable.